Good evening. My name is Sonto Chubukachi, and this is for the server system security Cyber 4220 Structure James due February 8, 2026. And this is my AppArmor and HTTPS presentation. On to the next slide. So, AppArmor and HTTPS security overview. So, this is the overview of what's going to be the two things we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the in-depth security research and its hardening. And we're going to talk about the Linux and Windows server environment. These are the two topics we're going to be going in today, and the presentation objectives for today. So I'm going to explain the technical role of AppArmor in Linux security. We're going to be going through how to demonstrate AppArmor status verification for server checks. We're going to examine HTTPS and its insecure counterpart HTTP. We're going to identify server applications used for HTTPS configuration. We're going to present hardening recommendations for IIS and Apache, and we're going to support lab configuration and security validation. So this is just basically telling us all the objectives this presentation is going to contain. And the AppArmor technical role. AppArmor is a Linux security model. I think it's a bit familiar to some people, and it's not familiar because I'm not familiar with AppArmor. So this is basically my first time learning about it and doing research on it. So AppArmor is a Linux security model that enforces mandatory access control. It restricts applications using predefined security profiles that control file access, capabilities, and network permissions. AppArmor limits the impact of compromised services by enforcing least privilege execution at the kernel level. So this is just basically telling us that AppArmor is a Linux security model, and it's basically it restricts applications using its predefined security profiles that control file access, capabilities, and network permissions. How AppArmor works: it uses path-based access control. So the access control that's being used is path-based, and the profiles define permitted resources per application. It operates independently of user permissions. Profiles stored in /etc/appamor.d/ commonly enabled by default on Ubuntu server. So this slide is just basically telling us how the AppArmor works, because it's a Linux based, so it's going to work well with Ubuntu. So it's basically commonly enabled by default on Ubuntu. Then the AppArmor status verification. So the command used to verify AppArmor status on Linux is going to be sudo AppArmor _status. That is the command used to verify AppArmor status, and this is the command I used while I was setting up my Ubuntu server. While I was setting up my Ubuntu server for this particular project. So this output confirms whether AppArmor is enabled, the number of active profiles, and whether profiles are enforced or in complaint mode. This command is required for Linux server security validation. Like I said, this was the command I used to check to see if AppArmor was enabled, the number of profiles are active, and whether profiles are enforced or in complaint mode. To the next slide. So these are my AppArmor hardening recommendations. I will recommend enforcing AppArmor profiles for all network facing services. I will recommend restrict application access to sensitive system directories. I will recommend regularly review logs and remove unused or permissive profiles. So these are my 3 recommendations for AppArmor, which is enforcing AppArmor profiles for all network facing services, to restrict application access to sensitive system directories, basically like access control, and then regularly review logs and remove unused or permissive profiles. The next slide, HTTPS technical role. HTTPS, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, it protects web traffic using TLS encryption. So HTTPS, you use encryption on it, which makes it to protect the web traffic. It ensures confidentiality, integrity, and authentication of data exchange between clients and servers, preventing interception and tampering during transmission. So HTTPS is, it basically follows the triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and authentication of data exchange, so your data don't get misplaced or get tampered with. So um so this is basically what everyone wants: the confidentiality, integrity, and authentication. So HTTP versus HTTPS comparison. So HTTP has no encryption, is vulnerable to packet sniffing, and his default port is port 80. So on the HTTP, it has no encryption at all, so it does not need no encryption, and is vulnerable to packet sniffing, and his default port is port 80. And then on the HTTPS, it encrypts. He uses encryption using TLS to to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability against tampering and against hacking. So it protects against MITM attacks. So it helps protect against attacks. It's not vulnerable to attacks, and then its default port is port 403 on the HTTPS. So this is basically my comparison between the HTTP and the HTTPS. So if you're going through it, just take a look at it and see the difference. So the HTTPS on Windows Server IIS. So Internet Information Services, which is the IIS, is Microsoft web server platform. The HTTPS is configured using TLS certificates and HTTPS bindings. For lab purposes, a self-signed certificate is sufficient to validate port 443 using ZMAP or Nmap. I am very much familiar with the Nmap, and I've had like a lab one time where I had to use the HTTPS, and then I was able to validate with the port 443. So this is basically my overview on the HTTPS on Windows Server IIS. Okay, so my IIS HTTPS handling recommendations. So I'll recommend disable HTTP or redirect traffic to HTTPS, because HTTPS is encrypted, HTTPS is less vulnerable, and so I would recommend disabling the HTTP or redirecting the traffic to HTTPS for better findings when reviewing the logs. So disable weak SSL and TSL protocol versions. So I would also disable the weak SSL and TSL protocol versions, because it being weak is already open for vulnerabilities, is already open for hacking. It's high risk of hacking and high risk of vulnerability. And then harden cipher suits and enable perfect forward secrecy. So these are my 3 recommendations for the IIS HTTPS hardening recommendation. And then the HTTPS on Linux Apache server. So Apache HTTP server is a widely used open source web server for Linux, and the HTTPS is enabled using OpenSSL modules. The lab objective is to ensure port 443 is active and detectable during network scans. So this is just telling us that the objective is to ensure that the port 443 for the HTTPS is active and detectable during network scans. So on to the next. So this is my Apache hardening recommendations. So I would recommend disabling outdated TSL protocol, because outdated protocols is always good to disable them, because it's um it's a high risk of vulnerability, high risk of hacking if it is outdated. So that's why it's always good to keep updating the protocols, and enforce strong cipher suits and hide server versions information. So these three are my three Apache hardening recommendations. And then the next slide, these are my references for this project. Thank you.